Etrian Odyssey went on to accomplish the goal it set out to do, revitalize the dungeon crawler genre. Well, kind of. Its focus being more traditional and old school, for better or worse. It's not surprising that some people would be turned away from this game, whether for the lack of its story, or because people kept getting punched in the throat because the game was, in fact, kind of hard. Reception was a little all over the place, but first of all, you should take a game journalist's opinion with a grain of salt. And secondly, it was still mostly positive, and it sold okay. By the genre standards at least. Clearly there was interest for this type of game, so it makes sense that ATLUS would want to keep up the momentum with a sequel. Something to take what the first game did and improve on it while trying not to undermine what attracted people in the first place. That being the dungeon crawling. That said, when I was looking into this game, I found opinions to be even more mixed. Some people liked it, some people really liked it, and some people think it's the worst game in the series, if not just a bad game. Something else to note is that it wouldn't be the same director overseeing development this time, not even providing input into this entry or the rest of the series going forward from what I could tell. I thought to mention this because some people might see this in the somewhat more scathing reviews and wonder if something went wrong, but did anything really go wrong? Maybe we just remember it badly, or maybe we should just accept it as a quote-unquote mid-sequel and put it back into the recesses of our mind. But what would be the point of this little series if I just skipped over the second game and all of its supposed infamy? Same procedure here. I did 2 playthroughs, one in the OG and the other in the remaster. Though I actually have a good reason this time. Etrian Odyssey 2 features a password system when you start a new game. If you beat the first game and go into the options menu after loading your save, you can get a password that can be entered in the middle of this intro sequence. If you do this, you can kind of carry over save data from Etrian 1. You get a neat little accessory depending on game completion. The townsfolk will recognize your exploits from Etria, and even some event dialogue changes. It's not an A and B scenario or anything, but it is nice that you get acknowledgement from your past experience if you have said experience. It's also just a nice way of thanking people for playing the first game. It's not an item that can give you a huge advantage either, it's just a small little boon, and that's neat. More sequel games should do stuff like that. Fun little fact for you, out of curiosity I tried putting my password for my OG playthrough into the remaster's password system. And it worked. I just thought that was interesting. It must be a completely identical system for that to still work properly. And no, I'm not talking about 2 Untold. We'll get there, but that day is not today. Of all the games in the series, I think this is the one I had the least experience with. I don't think I even went past the second stratum. I probably got frustrated midway through and quit. But I was a kid at the time. I'm older, more patient, bolder. Maybe not much wiser, but my mind is at least developed now, so I'm ready to see what this game is really like. So let's take the invitation upwards. This is Etrian Odyssey 2, Heroes of Lagarde. Etrian Odyssey 2 takes place in the northern lands of High Lagarde, home to its own world tree, known of course as Yggdrasil. Legends state that Yggdrasil was once a gateway to a floating castle, and one day, the residents of Lagarde discovered that it houses a labyrinth-like dungeon within. Soon afterwards, the Duke of Lagarde calls upon the Guard Corps and like-minded adventurers to explore Yggdrasil to see if the legend is true, offering reward and renown to anyone able to uncover the mystery. But no matter how many go in, none have ever succeeded. A trend that will permeate throughout this entire series. In comes you, one of the many new adventurers arriving to Lagarde to challenge the labyrinth. You establish your guild, go through their initiation process, then you are let loose to explore the labyrinth, and that's kind of it. But you're not just exploring the labyrinth for the sake of it this time. There is some urgency to this mission. The Duke of Lagarde has fallen gravely ill, and none of their doctors or medicines have been able to help him. The legend hinted at a magical treasure in the floating castle, a holy grail that can be used to create an elixir that cures any illness. The ingredients of said elixir also being within the labyrinth. But the expedition is more akin to a desperate suicide mission, and that's something the game's gonna remind you of constantly. Whereas the first game took time getting you comfortable before any dark twists started popping up, Etrian Odyssey 2 doesn't bother putting up a front. As soon as the first mission, the initiation process adventurers have to do before being recognized as residents of Lagarde, by the way, you get dragged into the middle of the first floor and forced to make your way back. I mean, you know where the town is. If you are as tough as you claim to be, then there should be no problem, right? But if you die? Meh. It's not their problem anymore. Like, no, it's not that hard of a mission, but it really sets the tone, doesn't it? The theme of the strata kind of fits this too. It's like you're watching a tragedy slowly unravel. Like, the gravity of this mission starts to set in and you have to claw your way through overwhelming odds, knowing that one small misstep could turn your guild into a statistic. Knowing that if you were to die here, you would become one of the many faceless adventurers and guards that were lost in the crowd of newcomers, trying to be the exception. It's great. They do a pretty good job emphasizing the struggle of the town, how Lagarde has to throw swaths of soldiers and adventurers into the labyrinth, how few often return from their forays, all for a legend that may or may not even be real. Spoilers, it's real. It would be pretty anticlimactic if it just ended at the 4th stratum. Etrian 1 needed more inference to piece together a kind of plot, and it was more centered on you and your experience. Etrian 2 is more in your face and not about you. You just happen to be very good at your job, and the government decided that they actually like you this time. Sorry, spoiler. It's not bad different, just different. You have a lot more events that happen in the labyrinth, some more in-depth than others, and some very cruel. The town's also better fleshed out. Each NPC gets way more dialogue here. They usually have something different to say when you get to another floor, whether it's the child that runs the front of a weapons store because her father is just too busy making the weapons. A very blunt and stoic knight that sometimes gives you useful advice or a half-hearted compliment. Or the cooler, sassier, and more depressed bartender who apathetically watches adventurers come and go, likely to their deaths, whose cheap jokes and laughs play as a front to that apathy. Side quests also give more world building and just have more substance in general, sometimes whole quest chains, but their rewards are still pretty bad, and they are really annoying to do this time around. Seriously, there's some interesting bits of lore behind these side quests, if not just some entertaining dialogue, and they are just not worth doing because they're just extremely tedious with very little payoff. I really hope this is something they address in the next game. But of course, the story is never truly the main focus of these games. After you're done chatting up with the locals and getting your team set up, there's nothing else to do but to begin the climb. Good luck. You're gonna need it for this one. A new labyrinth means new flavors of stratum. This time it's in the theme of the year's seasons. Summer, fall, winter, spring, golden palace? Heaven? I'm not sure. But just because the scenery is different doesn't mean this labyrinth's any less harsh. Far from it. Each stratum, of course, has their own gimmick, like Tutorial Land, Everything Hurts, Molasses Skating, Floating Islands bundled with 2 cult classics, Damage Tiles and Pitfalls, and Conveyor Belt City. There's some new monsters to fight, of course, events that often like to hurt you more than help, more in general suffering. They often like leaving debris out on the floors, stuff like this. You can't pass over it, but you can see beyond it to spot upcoming sections of the floor, similar to the sky. Certain FOEs can also move over this space though. Something to keep in mind if you see a blueberry colored fuzzball roaming the map. Oh yeah, FOEs come in some new flavors. Blue ones can fly over debris or open areas, and purple ones can't be seen on the map. That's it. That's their gimmick. In addition to this, they also added what I like to call FOE control. There are items and skills you can get in this game that can lure or stop most FOEs in their tracks. I stress most because it doesn't affect them all and it's a bit inconsistent on what will or won't be affected, but these are still very useful and very important, if not for getting out of bad spots, then to navigate around puzzles, and you'll realize that before you leave the first stratum. Tutorial land, people! Why do the puzzle when you can just not? I like the idea of having to manipulate FOEs like this to get through, luring them out of pathways or disrupting their movement patterns to get past as an alternative to just solving the puzzle normally, especially since solving them normally can be quite a hassle here. It comes down to the movement patterns and their positioning. It's really hard to get a read on some of them because of how limited your view is, and because FOEs aren't shown on the map unless you get really close to them. Or you could just use a survivalist with the right skill. You could also kill it, I guess, but I really wouldn't recommend it this time around. I'll explain why later because it feeds into a pretty big complaint I have with this game, as do most people. The biggest improvement to Labyrinth exploration, though, are the map tools. Arrows to annotate shortcuts and conveyor belts, different tile colors to mark hazards or ice skating, different gathering node icons. This could have been better. You could argue there was a minimalistic charm to having your tools restricted, and I would agree, but I think it's significantly better here by the fact that you just have more at your disposal. Nothing here feels awkward to map out anymore. It's great. Plus, more tools means more ways people can be creative or do what makes sense to them. Nothing is stopping you from putting a door icon where a shortcut is. Welcome to High the Guard. Do you have health insurance? I sure hope so, because you're gonna be coming here a lot. We should actually talk about classes first. Etrian Odyssey 2 retains all the original classes from the first game, and throws 3 new ones into the mix: Gunner, War Magus, and Beast. I didn't use Beast other than that thing I'm going to elaborate on later, but the other 2 are interesting in their own ways. Gunner is a backliner focusing largely on DPS with different flavors of gun. Elemental shots, risky elemental shots. They can be quite a powerhouse, but they also have some utility in and outside of battle too. There was even a point where my gunner started to outdamage my Ronin, and Ronin's whole shtick is going all in with the damage. Blessed be the musket, I guess. War Magus, on the other hand, is a sort of jack-of-all-trades that leans into every role a little bit. Though they prioritize being healers, they can also get some single-target buffs and utility skills, and even some fairly decent offense in the form of these War Edge skills. War Edge is a bit niche, though, since its effectiveness largely depends on you inflicting status ailments, which in translation means using the skill that actually corresponds with each ailment. It feels a little too restrictive and makes you focus into one specific ailment, especially since these skills go up 10 levels. But they make up for it by having the best fit out of all of the classes and being a contender for having the worst passive in the game. The remake did you so much better. Oh my god, you poor thing. But not only do you get new ways to hit an enemy with a stick, the OGs also got a pretty major rework to their kit. And I'll just say that some of your old tricks from the first game will probably not work here. A lot of skills got nerfed really hard, if not just removed entirely. Like Troubadour's sustainability skills and Medic's absurdly powerful immunize. Etrian Odyssey 2 also scales TP costs very differently, where before they would increase in cost a little bit and then stop, or maybe have specific level thresholds for it. Here, they now increase with every skill point you put into them, barring a few exceptions. I mention these things in particular because playing defensively was very easy back in the first game, thanks to Immunize and Protector's defender skills, reducing damage to virtually nothing. Combat is mechanically unchanged, but the encounter design is a lot different. Etrian Odyssey 2 places more emphasis on being quick and aggressive, usually trying to end fights as efficiently as possible. You can still make a traditional team comp work, but enemies hit hard, they use ailments and setup moves more often, and the best way to counter all of this, most of this anyway, is to use those same tactics right back at them. Binds, ailments, stuns, anything that can either wipe them out fast or shut them down before they can do anything really mean, because giving them even one turn can snowball things pretty fast. Case in point. Oh boy. All right. Oh. These aren't inherently bad changes, but with the removal of TP sustainability and the sheer lack of it in the labyrinth itself, you will run dry on resources pretty quickly. The healing springs from the first game are gone entirely, instead replaced with these geomagnetic fields, not to be confused with the geomagnetic poles, which act as one-way checkpoints that take you from the town to the labyrinth, so you'll still need a warp wire to get out. You can also only have one active at a time, but you will probably always prioritize setting it on the highest floor possible anyways. They also made it so that some skills only go up to 5 levels to get their full effectiveness, which is very nice. It means you can have more skills and more options, and it obviously makes other classes more flexible, like Hexer, which probably has one of the most busted skills in the game, and a really good AoE sleep skill that maxes out at 5 points. Regardless, this can make TP management more interesting when you don't have access to Amritas, which you can only get late into the 3rd stratum, but it also means you probably won't be able to use the newly added Force Break mechanic, the classic build up a meter and do a big attack button that every RPG seems to have nowadays. The first game had this boost thing that would, well, boost the next action you perform. Here it lets you do a big action that's unique to each class, ranging from okay to actually garbage to decently powerful skills. They have the potential to trivialize any fight regardless of the circumstances. But while the idea of running around with a mini nuke in your back pocket might sound fun, the issue is it charges so slowly. Excelas are a thing, but you won't get those until the literal end of the game, so your only option is to fight battles, which are resource heavy, and forces you to go back after a little while, which means your meter will get reset back to 0. You will probably never even get to use it unless you are actively grinding for it. Actually, I'm not even sure if you can beat the first boss without force breaks, or poison. Hexer with poison fully maxed out does some insane damage to it, despite it resisting poison, because it's either those options or you throw yourself to the grind. Which brings me to the next weird design choice, and probably my biggest gripe with this game. I mentioned earlier that FOEs weren't worth fighting. That's because they don't give XP. No, I'm serious, it's not a bug or anything, they just don't. They can drop materials, but I found the gear they make not really worth it, especially since the drop rate can kind of suck. Or maybe I'm just hilariously unlucky. Regardless, I'm guessing they wanted to treat them more like obstacles that would punish you very harshly for running into. But not even dropping XP is just weird. I feel it also takes away from that moment of fighting an FOE for the first time, being able to confront that thing you've had to run away from so many times. It was like you were climbing up the food chain, being on their level, maybe even better, and you were rewarded with better gear, more money, and, if not anything else, more XP. They were also just good indicators of whether or not you were ready for any upcoming challenges. That's just not the case here. If you think it sounds like the early game grind might be horrible, you'd be right. It kind of is horrible, with how often you'll be retreating to town, how limited your resources are, and the fact that everything just hurts and sucks. Ow. Etrian Odyssey 2 definitely has a much tighter difficulty curve at the start of the game. So if FOEs don't have this XP anymore, where do you go when you need to grind? Well, to the bosses, of course. Yeah, seriously, you can fight random battles, but I found refighting bosses to be way more lucrative and efficient, so I, in a bid not to be here for the next 2 months, took full advantage of Melon DS's speed up feature to make a very large level 1 cat I recruited into my guild sleep at the inn by itself for 2 weeks, went into the 6th floor via the geomagnetic field, pole, and walked down to greet the newly respawned Chimera with poison, gun, and whatever else I felt like that day. Then I went back to town, made over 30k selling the materials because conditional drops sell for so much in this game. Kill any other bosses I've unlocked for more experience, then I repeat the process until I'm satisfied. There is almost certainly a better way to grind, but I am not kidding when I said that this made what would have been a miserable grind into what felt like a speedrun to shoot God in the face. I'm exaggerating, of course, you get what I mean. And since XP gets divided among party members, doing it with fewer members to catch somebody up, while tedious as all hell, is actually pretty easy. It also makes experimenting with other classes a little more reasonable, since they lowered the rest cost from 10 levels to 5. Does this trivialize Etrian Odyssey 2? No, I don't think so. It probably could if you took it that far, but you can still get yourself into pretty bad spots if you just mess around and let the enemy do its thing. Bosses will certainly put up a fight, and FOEs can be pretty dangerous too if you accidentally bump into them. Chimera isn't too bad, nor is Hellion. They are fairly competent for the level you're supposed to fight them. Scylla is a bit of a difficulty spike, but also more of a bind/DPS check. If you don't have either of those, you're probably going to get walled here for a bit, but it's okay because Harpuya is a goddamn joke. Don't get me wrong, random encounters are still important for making new gear, but definitely not as much for money or XP. Hell, sometimes not even gear. If you sell the conditional drop from Chimera, you get one of the best bows in the entire game, if not the best bow. It might cost an arm and a leg, but put it in the hands of a survivalist and they might carry you through most of the mid-game in spite of their nerfs. Some really odd balancing decisions, to say the least. Why am I getting deja vu? Now that I think about it, there's actually quite a few odd decisions like this, which in any case can make Etrian Odyssey 2 more fun to break. I mentioned Hexer's plenty enough, but Dark Hunters have a skill that can instantly kill an enemy when they're below a certain health threshold. This skill doesn't seem to check for anything other than if the target is immune to instant death and is below that threshold. You have to max it out for it to be really useful, but you could just erase FOEs off the map if you find them annoying to deal with, and your team is actually able to keep their limbs attached long enough. This also makes the second boss, the Hellion, a complete joke because it doesn't null instant death. Just do enough damage and goodbye. Want a somewhat tinier mini nuke as opposed to a normal mini nuke? Invest in an alchemist and put all your points towards getting Megiddo. It's very mana hungry, but with enough Enritas and maybe a War Magus to act as a battery of sorts, you have a class that can nuke things. A couple hundred damage, you think? Random thoughts time. There's actually quite a bit of quality of life in this game. You can store stuff at the inn, you can strafe in the dungeons, you can choose when you want the map to track you via this little checkbox. There's this little box in the skill menu that tells you what prerequisites you need to learn a skill. They're minimal changes, sure, but it's something to appreciate when you're coming out of a game that didn't have those things. They nerfed gathering pretty hard in this game. Where before you could level these skills up to 10 and get 2 gathering attempts, now you only get 1 per level, and they reduced the max level to 5. I genuinely don't know why they would do this, because it just makes gathering more annoying than it should be, especially since they added the chance to get back attacked when you gather, which is about as fun as it sounds when your gathering team is not as suited for combat. I guess the question now is, should you play Etrian Odyssey 2? If you're going through the whole series like I am, there isn't really a reason to skip it. As annoying as this game's low points can be, I don't think it's anything that sours the whole experience. The music is fantastic, the story is kind of interesting. The art has improved significantly, and there's some really interesting ideas on display here. With that said, if you're trying to get into the series, I would not recommend starting with this one. Unless it's somehow your only option, then sure, I mean, nothing to lose, I guess. With a lot of odd balancing decisions, coupled with some pretty sadistic floor design, and a pretty dull grind in some parts, especially later into the game, it's one of the harder games in the series if you play it normally. This might appeal to you if you lean towards the hardcore side of RPGs though, or maybe if you just like snapping games like this in half, because you can certainly do that. And goddammit, it is really fun to do that. This game is still very playable though, and I don't think it's weaker than Etrian 1. It did some things better, some not so much. It's certainly innovative, maybe even a little ambitious for a first-person dungeon crawler on the DS, but its execution is rough. I mean, in the case of it being a new director stepping in to try and make a sequel in the span of a year, it's pretty good. But if you thought this game was innovative or ambitious, holy shit, you were not ready for Etrian Odyssey 3. Anyways, I'm gonna go get sucked into event for another 2-3 months. If you want my opinion on the remaster, go to this timestamp in the first video. Okay, bye! Still here? Hello to the people that are actually still here. So, fun fact, I was going to do a bit of an April Fool's joke where I play that one really obscure Etrian Odyssey mobile game. but then realized, oh yeah, that doesn't really exist anymore, lol. So I had to can the idea, but could you imagine if someone said, "This is Etrian Odyssey 2," and then just a Google slideshow of images that look like this? Shit looks like backrooms footage.
Change the world. My final message. Goodbye.
I just thought that was funny. Okay, bye for real.